First of all, it's good to see you all again, even though it is a bit remote. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching this live stream for this meeting via the Fire Services YouTube page. And I'll go through the normal introductions for regularity. Due to government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus flexibility of local authority police and crime panel members meetings, regulations 2020. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Fire Services YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I'd ask all members to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the normal manner. Any member wishing to ask questions or to make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right hand side of the screen, which you should all be familiar with by now. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officers to respond. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving IT systems, there's always a risk we may run into technical problems. If we do, I ask for your patience, and if necessary, I'll declare an adjournment until the fault's addressed. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. We'll make a start by calling all names of all members of the panel to establish your presence or absence. Please confirm your presence when Dawn calls your name. Dawn, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barbara Ashwood.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Bond. Don't think Councillor Bond's joined us yet. Councillor Simon Bywater.
Present.
Councillor Ian Gardner.
Present.
Councillor Derek Giles. Again, I don't think Councillor Giles has joined us yet. Councillor Janet Goodwin. Oh, sorry, Councillor Giles.
Yes, I'm here.
Right.
Finally.
Councillor Janet Goodwin. I don't think she's with us yet. Councillor John Gowing.
Present.
Councillor Linda Harford.
I'm here.
Councillor Bill Hunt.
Present.
Councillor Mohammed Jamil.
Present.
Councillor Sebastian Kindersley.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Matt Maguire.
Present.
Councillor David Over.
Present.
Councillor Kevin Reynolds.
Present.
Councillor Jocelyn Scott.
Present.
Councillor Mike Shellens.
Here.
And Councillor Mandy Smith.
Present.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Dawn. Are there any apologies that you've received, Dawn?
I haven't received any apologies, but I think we've established that we're missing Councillors Bond and Goodwin, and they may join us later.
Okay. At this stage, does any member... carry on.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but Janet's unlikely to be with us. She's quite seriously ill and certainly wasn't at full council in Peterborough yesterday.
Right. I think I'll write to her on behalf of the authority. I know she's had a prolonged illness. I haven't spoken to her for a couple of months. Normally I speak to her fairly regularly, so I'll send the best wishes on behalf of the Fire Authority. At this stage, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No. We'll move on to item 2 of the agenda, minutes of the Fire Authority meeting held on the 25th of June. The minutes can be found in the agenda pack, pages 3 to 16. Please note that the page numbers listed on the agenda front sheet are slightly out. I will let you have the correct page numbers at the start of each item, then we'll make sure that we're all addressing the same subject. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting 25th of June as correct. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised right-hand function now? Okay, thank you for that. I see no objection to approve the minutes as a correct record, so we'll take that as carried. Next item, Chairman's announcements. As you can see this time, there's only 2 main announcements really from myself. The first one is to offer congratulations to Jackie Gavin, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Advisor, on her award for the British Empire Medal. And secondly, just a brief update on our recent inspection by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services with a thematic inspection regarding COVID. I know it was quite an in-depth inspection, albeit done at distance. I was interviewed for over an hour, and at that interview, I felt reasonably confident that Cambridgeshire, I was going to say ahead of the game. It's always difficult to get ahead when things change so much, but I believe we're doing a really good job with regard to COVID. It's surprising what's going on behind the scenes. And I think the HMI went away from Cambridgeshire reasonably impressed, but hey ho, we don't know until the report comes out. As soon as we get a copy of the report, that'll be circulated to all members. If we now move on to item 4, which is property update, and you'll find it on pages 17 to 22. Can I ask Matthew to introduce this report, which starts at page 17? Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Okay, so yeah, just really a quick run through of where we're at with regard to many of the ongoing property projects we've got. So fire station, training centre, the St John's site, moving forward nicely now. We expect planning 24th of December, so that'll hopefully be a nice Christmas present for us all, that we'll get a positive outcome. All things being well, that will then lead to commencement on site in March, April time next year. All of the legal agreements are pretty much there or thereabouts now. There's nothing that's going to stop us from now entering into contractual arrangements. It's taken a little bit longer for many reasons. Largely, it's just been to and fro from a legal perspective, but we are there or thereabouts now, so that's positive as well. In terms of once work begins, then we're going to look at what we do with our current Huntingdon site and also St Ives, which was obviously linked to this development, particularly in terms of the financing. So I'm working with the NHS again and police colleagues, but predominantly the NHS at the site of St Ives, because they've got an adjacent piece of land that they may well look to sell for development or do something with. So it makes sense for us to do it together. So we are working with them as a partner at the moment. Again, I'll look to bring that to a conclusion quite quickly if we can, because otherwise it could drag on, and we clearly don't want it to drag on. In terms of the Huntingdon site, all those that are affected by that change, I mean, the station itself and training centre are well engaged with the project, and those that are living in the Brow, so we still have 4 houses at the back of the Brow that are linked to the station. Those have all been informed of the current timescales, and we're keeping them up to date. And as and when we get a positive planning permission, then clearly there's more certainty around timescales and what we're going to do with that site potentially. So that's where we're at with regard to Huntingdon. So all quite positive, and we continue to move, albeit waiting for Huntingdonshire District Council. And just for information, the chairman has signed a letter that was sent to the head of planning at Huntingdonshire yesterday, just to hopefully provide some encouragement that nothing else will be put in our way on that site. So that's Huntingdon. So any questions before I move off of the Huntingdon?
I can't see any hands raised at this stage, Matthew.
Okay, great.
Continue.
So St Neots, and again, St Neots has been a long time on the agenda. Members will recall that we started working on this project probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I would imagine, with our police colleagues. For whatever reason, things have been dragged out, but we are now in a position, and again, appended to this report is a design that's been agreed now by the two services. So there's going to be an extension to St Neots Fire and Rescue Station, and a second floor put onto that part of the extension, and then we'll have a joint police and fire station at St Neots, which will allow the police to sell their current site, which they don't use anymore. So that's positive, and the police will be funding that extension. And we will be getting a refurb of our station as well at the same time, because it's going to be more of a generic use of that station in the broader sense. Again, all of those affected parties have been consulted. They've approved. Effectively, the station have agreed the plans. So again, positive, and it's our one, if you like, whole time station, day cruise station, that is still in need of some tender care. It needs to be improved and enhanced. So that's a positive. Taken longer than we've anticipated, but again, it's a positive to hopefully, again, depending on planning, Huntingdonshire District Council. So, but fingers crossed that should be a positive planning consent again. Any questions on St Neots?
Yeah, Councillor Giles.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I hope you can hear me. Yes, you can. Yeah, on St Neots, is there any news on any collaboration with the ambulance service, because they do have a site on, well, unit on site? Will they be involved in this new project at all or not?
No. So again, we did have some conversation some time back with the ambulance service, Councillor Giles, and I may have informed members. I can't recall because it was quite a long while ago. But the ambulance service at the time were looking to change their operating model, so they were going to have a major hub in Huntingdon, which was close to the accident and emergency department, and then effectively send their appliances out as satellites. And so St Neots was effectively going to be a satellite site, so they didn't really have any interest at that time in collaboration. I can ask again, but I wouldn't want to hold up this project any longer, really.
No, Matthew, it might be worthwhile just writing to the ambulance service and more of informing them what we're doing and where we're at, and just in case they want to put their hand up and say, can we join in? I very much doubt it, because long-term planning with the ambulance service is very difficult. They've not really sort of got it all together, but they can't say that we haven't kept them informed.
No.
I can't see anybody else wishing to ask any questions. Does that bring us to the end of your report, Matthew?
Just a couple of minutes. I'll just touch on briefly then, Kevin. So Cambridge Fire Station, we continue to work with the police in terms of what their requirements might be in sharing that site. But that's, again, it's ongoing, shall we say. So it's just saying we haven't, neither side has dismissed it yet, but I think it's probably, that one's probably going to be more challenging in terms of what their requirements might be in the end for us to be able to accommodate. So there's that one. But alongside that, we've dusted down the potential collaboration of teams, so property functions, if you like, property teams, just to see whether or not there is anything in that. And I'm looking to prepare a business case and bring that back to members in December. and we want to conclude it one way or another this time, because if you remember, it started, then it sort of again was put into the long grass for various reasons. But now we want to conclude it. Is it a goer or is it not? And then we can move on either way. So I'm looking to bring that back in December. That's it. That's it, Kevin.
What to policy in December?
Yes.
And then we've got our next fire authority meeting is early February.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's cool. Councillor Hunt first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Probably everybody knows the answers. Are we discussing a lease with the police at Parkside? And if so, how long a lease would it be, Matthew?
So yes, I mean, again, it's very early days, Councillor. So what we're looking to do is actually get an understanding of what their requirements are first, to understand whether or not we can accommodate their requirements, because they have, for various reasons, they've been restructured in the police and they've changed their requirements. So we need to nail that down. That's the bit we're trying to do at the moment. Once we've got that, then yes, we've actually started talking around leases. And I think initially we're talking probably a 5-year lease in initial terms.
Okay, that was one question. The other one is, would the plan, you've got a plan here of what it might be or it might look like, would it be a problem to the fire authority if 2 years in the police decided they want to go? It doesn't look to me like you've done anything or you're proposing anything that is exclusively for police, so you wouldn't be left holding the baby if they vacated after 2 years.
Yeah, so that, yeah, so Councillor, yeah, that's in terms of St Neots, absolutely. So we're looking for them to fund that part of the project. So they'll fund it, and if they then chose to vacate it, it's still our freehold site. So yes, there wouldn't be a liability for us.
Oh, and finally, is there any car parking facility there?
Small amounts. And what we're looking to do, again, there's a some of you will know, that have been to St Neots, we've got a large piece of land out of the back of St Neots, and we're looking to convert some of that.
I'm talking about.
Oh, you're doing Cambridge. Yeah, there is car parking facilities in Cambridge, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shellings, followed by Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points. First of all, given that there is now a requirement for emergency services to collaborate, 3.1, I think the decision's already been taken to contact the ambulance service is prudent. Secondly, I get continually irritated in that there seems to be a sense coming through official documents that there is now a requirement to collaborate. We've been collaborating for years, and I think it would be reasonable to say to continue to collaborate. And I would like to know if someone can send me outside the meeting the list of collaborations with the police that have happened within the last 4 or 5 years, so that we can cite them. Thank you, Chairman.
And actually, thank you, Councillor, because one of the things we've been discussing actually earlier in the week was us dusting down that list of all of those collaborations and making sure it's as up to date as it possibly can be, because we've got some more recent ones, and Chris Parker's on the call. But we've got collaboration with regard to drones, and that's a very, very recent one, Councillor Shannon. So yes, absolutely, it's a good time to dust that list down and send it around to everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, we were ahead of the game on collaborations and doing it long before it was a requirement to do so, mainly out of necessity for resources and delivering the services in case of having to collaborate. And it gives us a good head start, which I'm pleased to say. Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chairman. Moving on from the collaboration issue, you'll be aware that the police intend to build a new Cambridge facility in Milton. And I think it would be as wise if we were to approach the police saying we wouldn't mind assessing the site at Milton just to see if there's anything that we can collaborate with you there on, because then at least we will have discharged our duty in relation to that particular site. Yeah,
Matthew, I think we've got a place in Milton, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got a training facility in Milton, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously their site or their proposed site new police station effectively, and there's going to be cells are located on that site as well. But yeah, certainly I think it's probably worth a conversation in terms of, is there any collaborative space that we can use? Maybe even if it's just office accommodation, whether we need it, is that we can have that conversation. Absolutely, Councillor Kingswood.
Yeah, I think it's always useful to have a letter or evidence on file if it's ever said to us in the future that we didn't go to every opportunity. I think if we can get in touch with them and just ask the question, are there any opportunities for collaboration on that site? Okay, we've been asked to note the progress made to date and approve the next steps as outlined in the report. I didn't see anybody dissenting, so we'll take that as a yes, Dawn. So we'll move on now to item 5, pages 23 to 26, and the report starts at page 23. And can I ask the Chief, Chris Strickland, to introduce this report, please? Chris.
Good afternoon, Chair. I've got Ryan Stacey, who's on the line. He's responsible for fire protection and community safety. So I think the best person would be for him to run through. But I'm obviously happy to take any questions as well.
Right, that's fine. Thank you. Hi, Ryan. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yeah, I had an opportunity to present a brief update at this seminar earlier last month. So it's a follow-on from that. You've had the report in front of you, and hopefully that makes a degree of sense. So I won't go through it verbatim. Suffice to say that the organisation is engaged in a building risk review programme, which kicked off as a result largely of the tragic incident at Grenfell Tower a couple of years ago. Phase 1 of that was to look at buildings that were clad in ACM, which is aluminium composite material, and we also took that to be high pressure laminate following the Bolton Cube incident up in Bolton, Manchester last year. Phase 2 of that building risk review programme is to look at all high-rise buildings, whether they're clad or not, over 18 metres, and undertake an audit of those, which we are engaged in at the minute. There is a realisation and a recognition that as well as our statutory duty to inform the fire safety order, this does present an additional burden on us, and any diversion of resources away from our statutory duty clearly has an impact. This is what the grant has been provided for, to help fire and rescue services discharge not only their statutory duty, but the additional burden of undertaking the building risk review programme. We've taken a decision that we are going to accelerate our investment in fire safety training. This will allow us to accelerate the extent to which some of our fire safety staff are trained around cladding on buildings, but also accelerate the training on watch-based staff. So our watch-based staff can pick up the fire safety audits that our specialist staff are being drawn away from through doing the building risk review programme. This will allow there to be minimal, if any, impact on our ability to discharge our duties, particularly around the risk-based inspection programme that we undertake as a dip sample of some of those high-risk premises. As well as that, we also have some money has been made available to us for a long-term fire protection uplift grant. We've continued our investment through the period of austerity since 2010, and our fire protection teams haven't taken a cut in terms of the numbers. So we've kept a level number and increased actually the number of people in our fire protection teams who are able to enforce, unlike some fire and rescue services, which puts us in a really good position. We're looking at using that grant uplift to produce and further develop some of our electronic systems that sit in the background, which allow us to share information between our specialist fire protection officers on building plans and systems that are in place for fire safety, and share them with some of our operational crews in real time. This will allow the real-time inspections that our staff are carrying out and the information that's likely to be coming in from responsible persons under changes or potential changes to fire safety legislation to be shared with operational crews in near to real time, which means they'll have the very most up-to-date information should they attend the scene of a fire. We're also looking to spend some of that money on accelerating our web-based training platforms around fire protection, which will mean that some of our watch-based staff can accelerate their development in fire protection thus creating a much more streamlined career pathway into fire protection when you become a specialist officer. Clearly, with any sort of digital upgrade, there are huge numbers of interdependencies with all our other systems. So this will be closely managed and monitored through our digital strategy board and through our internal program board to ensure that we can manage the finances, but also the critical interdependencies with all our other electronic systems and learning and development systems. We're required to provide a financial update to the National Fire Chiefs Council on a quarterly basis, and it will also go through our programme board in the same way. I know some of members of the seminar asked questions around sprinklers and the extent to which, as an organisation, we are pushing sprinklers buildings, particularly residential buildings, and that remains one of our key approaches. And our sprinkler strategy does exactly that. It requests that developers of buildings and people who have existing high-rise buildings do consider the installation of sprinklers, even when they're not mandatory. And we have had some success with that, notably in Peterborough, where a building developer has retrofitted sprinklers in an existing build. So we are working and will continue to work to ensure that sprinklers are maintained in all residential buildings. I'm happy to take any questions as a result of the paper.
Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you. I knew that would happen. Oh, okay. Councillor Hartford, followed by Councillor Smith. Linda.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for that that very good report. You actually answered in your presentation a question that I had, so thank you for that. I just want to say that I do fully support the allocation of the funding, the grant to further training of existing personnel, particularly in view of the fact that the grant is for only 1 year. I would, though, if I may, like to ask you a bit more about your endorsement or recommendation or encouragement for sprinklers in new buildings, because as a member of different planning committees, I know that latterly members have been greatly concerned that where appropriate, sprinklers should be put in. The point I want to make is that whereabouts, or the question I want to ask is, whereabouts do you make your views on that known? Because I can't recall having seen it on your consultation response to planning applications. Generally, all that includes is fire hydrants. So I just wondered how you make those representations to developers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will make it in a couple of ways. We only have an ability to mandate the fitting of sprinklers in buildings over 30 metres. Clearly, within Cambridgeshire, there are very few buildings which breach that number. So we can only make recommendations for buildings that sit underneath 30 metres, and we will always make a recommendation, although we can't enforce that recommendation. So we will always make a recommendation in buildings such as schools, in residential high-rise or medium low-rise buildings to fit sprinklers. We have an opportunity at Gateway 1, which is the very initial planning stages. We are engaged with local authority building control in a couple of areas where we will make those very informal recommendations. So before they've even come through to formal planning, we seek to highlight our desire to have buildings with sprinklers. But ultimately, unfortunately, we can only mandate the use of sprinklers in buildings over 30 metres, which is why you won't see it as an enforceable recommendation from us in buildings that are underneath that. It'll only be as a recommendation, not as a requirement.
Can I just very quickly say that although I absolutely understand the position with regard to mandating it, I do think it would be incredibly helpful if you even put a comment in your consultation responses that says, despite the fact that legislation doesn't allow for us to mandate this, we would encourage the applicant to consider the installation of sprinklers in whatever planning applications you feel that might be appropriate, because I think members of planning committees would really welcome that expert comment, and I don't see why you can't make it, even though, you know, even if you have to acknowledge that you can't mandate it.
I think that's a really valid point, Councillor. I will double check that, because it was my understanding that we did that. So I will check that that is the case and make sure that if it isn't going out on all occasions, that it does go in as even a non-enforceable recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, perhaps that's an area we can talk at policy sometime in the future, because it's not so straightforward as it seems. There's some pitfalls there that need to be fully discussed. We've got waiting to speak Councillor Mandy Smith, Councillor Scott, Councillor Shellings, and I see David, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
It's just a little blue hand that normally catches my eye. Let's deal with Mandy, then you, then Jocelyn. Mandy.
Thank you. I'll be brief because Councillor Hartford did raise a few things that I was going to raise. Basically, I'm like how we seem to be sort of concentrating on present buildings, how we are working on future buildings. So I do agree with the comments through the planning system about just making a comment at least. Did I hear you correctly that we only put, or sprinklers only can go in residential buildings, or we only say in residential buildings?
No, we can. There's a multitude of requirements where we put sprinklers in. For residential buildings, there is a requirement of them being 30 metres or more before we would mandate sprinklers, or there would need to be another specific reason for us to require the use of sprinklers in a building.
So what happens about non-residential buildings?
So non-residential buildings, it would depend on what part of the fire safety order we're enforcing against. I have to say you're probably going to be testing my knowledge of the fire safety order in truth. But yeah, we have an opportunity.
It makes me feel better because, you know, but it's just, you know, non-residential buildings as well. They need to be, the whole sprinkler system and the planning system needs to be sort of tied up, I suppose.
So clearly our priority is people and their ability to evacuate buildings in the event of a fire. So that's why we would have life systems in place, whether it be fire alarms or fire sprinkler systems or other fire suppression systems, would be to facilitate the evacuation of people within a building.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but like I said, perhaps we can deal with this at policy at a future date so we can get underneath it. Because it's not just fire service requirements. Quite often sprinklers are imposed by insurance companies as well. So if we get all the facts, then you can make a balanced judgment on how you wish to do it. David, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I would support this aspect of sprinklers and misting coming to policy, for certainly in Peterborough to make repeated and concerted attempts to get it discussed at planning. Something like 15 years we've tried to get councillors and officers to insist on sprinklers, and developers have just said, no, we're not going to do it. It increases the price of the house. But with regards to evacuation, so many houses in Peterborough are very close together, hemmed in, and evacuation could be very, very fraught with difficulties if there was a fire. Sprinklers and clouding would just help. And also thousands of houses have been built in Peterborough recently, and thousands more. This must be a one chance in a century of getting sprinklers in and misting units if we possibly can. So I'd say an informal comment to almost every planning application that there is out, certainly in Peterborough, if not the whole of Cambridgeshire.
Thank you. I think that just illustrates what a can of worms this can be if we don't have all the facts in front of us, which we will do in the future. Jocelyn, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for a very thorough report. I'm afraid I'm going to refer to sprinklers too. First, thank you very much for following this up in the way that the Fire Authority has. But secondly, I wanted to ask what actually brought the the building in Peterborough, the owners or the developers of that building, what brought them to the realization that it was valuable to do a retrofit? Because retrofit is always much more expensive, so that there must have been an impetus behind them doing that. And the final point I just want to make is, I understand as a consequence of the Grenville Tower that there is consideration for amending the fire regulations in relation to that 30-metre rule. But what did you do that was so persuasive to that building in Peterborough?
So yeah, without disclosing which building it was, I wish I knew what single factor it was. The organisation in itself felt they had a moral obligation to do it. I mean, clearly there is a business financial reason to do it. From a position of having a block of residential units, if you have a fire in one, you can rehome neighbours and the one unit much more quickly if the fire is being controlled with a residential sprinkler. It has an environmental benefit in terms of both the speed of the fire going out and the amount of water that's used to control that fire. So there are a number of reasons. I'm not sure what the specific factor was. We signed off on the sprinkler scheme only a week or so ago. Now we're going to work to do some wider media because again, those success stories from those individual developers are probably more persuasive for other developers than you or I having those conversations with them.
Thanks very much then. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps when we discuss sprinklers sometime in the future, this might be able to be used as a case study as well, just to give some background information. It might be some external factor, like insurance, for instance. We're not really clear at this stage. Can I now call upon Councillor Shallins and followed by Councillor Maguire? Mike, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. 3 points. Quickly, I very much agree with Linda's earlier comments about the benefit of doing what we are doing as regards to spending the money. We're arranging to invest in our own staff rather than have a one-year funding of someone who will then go and take all his accumulated knowledge with him. And that just seems to me to be absolutely prudent. Secondly, quickly, could you give us an order of magnitude to the nearest million as to how many properties we're talking about in Cambridgeshire? And also there is a reference to it causing us delay. Delay in what and how are we going to overcome it, please? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, in terms of to the nearest million premises that it affects us in Cambridgeshire, I think it's fair to say 0. We would be talking about less than 100 premises that will be affected by the risk, the building risk review. So it is small numbers. Clearly, as you've identified, we've got quite a lean fire protection team. We are resourced for the risk that we have within Cambridgeshire, and we're proud to have a robust risk-based inspection programme. So anything that impinges upon our predetermined risk-based inspection programme, in addition to the usual enforcements and complaints and notifications that we'd expect to serve, clearly has a pinch point. So we would, any change to what we'd already planned does cause us some difficulty. So the building grant has certainly provided us with an opportunity to make that offering a lot more robust.
Thank you.
Mac?
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to add to the list of speakers on this until you mentioned you wanted to discuss it at the Policy Committee. Of course, some of us are not on that, so opportunity would be missed. What I wanted to say, and I know some of you heard me say it before, and I think I mentioned it at the seminar, this is something which is close to my heart. I'm an ex-member of the National Fire Sprinkler Network and on the National Fire Safety Committee, and I've experienced all the pushbacks we've had, from developers, the building people all around the country. But one of the things that we did agree years ago at the County Council, and remembering that the County Council is in its certain cases, its own development control committee. So it's not just the districts with planning authority. We, and I don't think that's changed, but somebody might update me. We, for instance, as County Council, can deem ourselves planning permission to build a new school, to build a library, things like that. Now, one of the things that we agreed at the County Council several years ago, I can't remember exactly what it was, that in all our new builds, schools, and in some cases retro, if it was going to be some major development of an existing school, sprinklers would be fitted. Libraries, is a different matter, and I know we should be talking, and I think Ryan will appreciate this, more about fire suppression methods rather than sprinklers, because some members may recall that several years ago, the main library in Norwich City suffered major fire damage, and of course a lot of the damage was subsequently because of the amount of water that went in. So they used fire suppression, which is gas and type suppression methods. So notwithstanding that, I think it's something that we ought to, maybe Ryan can organise it with the help of members, to check certainly that the county council still has that as part of its policy when building schools. That might also give add a little weight to David Over's point about Peterborough City Council not necessarily having those same things. We work much more closely with Peterborough. So I would certainly advocate we try to find out exactly where we stand, even if we have to come up with some sort of compact, for want of a better word, between the fire service and the local authorities as to our approach to fire suppression. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mac. That is a fair point that you made about policy, because that cuts out half the members on scrutiny. It may well be the case that we can have a paper for information, not decision making, going to both. Because if it's a decision making paper, then we obviously can't send it to both. But what I wanted to avoid was today is making decisions on the hoof without knowing the full background. So I'll discuss with the officers the best way forward so that all members are involved and that all members are fully updated on the issues behind the scenes. Councillor Gardner, Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I would personally like to thank the Fire Authority with regard to, we recently had a planning application in Huntingdonshire where a house was being built at the back of existing properties, and the distance to get to the house was more than 45 metres, and members of the planning committee asked whether a fire engine would be able to service that particular property if it was on fire, and it was found that no, it wouldn't, because the hoses wouldn't be able to reach that far. As a consequence, the property then had the planning put in for it to have sprinklers because the fire authority couldn't reach it. So it does work if members know things like that, whereby hoses cannot reach the buildings. We have managed in Huntingdonshire to get sprinklers put in to assist the fire authority in those situations. So, you know, I would thank the fire authority for coming back to HDC planning to confirm to officers what their requirements are with regard to getting hoses to buildings which are built at the rear of properties, which is now seems to be more, we seem to be getting more and more of those coming in. So I would just like to say thank you very much for assisting the planning department in that situation.
Right, thank you for that comment. That's worth knowing. Councillor Bywater, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't disagree with the comments that have been raised so far. I wasn't going to speak, but I just really want to touch on the schools issues because, you know, ultimately I have a responsibility at the County Council as chairman. Ryan, the County Council are looking at the specifications for its school buildings, and there is a paper coming to the Children and Young People's Committee in January. A chap called Ian Trafford is currently working on that at the County Council. So through me, outside this meeting, if you want to touch base with me, I think it would certainly be worthwhile you having a conversation with him, because sprinklers is a constant discussion between members, and your clarity and steer perhaps would be beneficial. So, but in relation to the recommendations, I support these. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yes, it should be relatively easy to make contact with Ian Trafford, as he used to administer the fire service for many years, so I'm sure he'll understand what our needs are. Are there any more questions before we move on? No. Well, the recommendation is just to note the update. We've given it a good discussion. A lot of interesting points come out. So we'll take the report as being noted. We can now move on to item 6, which is on pages 27 to 34, regarding the ongoing COVID pandemic. And can I ask Chris Parker to introduce this report, which does start on page 27. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and afternoon, members. As you're probably aware, this paper has kind of it keeps growing every time I talk to you. So what I won't do is I won't go through a lot of the stuff that I know we went through in the seminar, and certainly the overview and scrutiny committee have looked at in detail. Probably what will be more useful for you today is if I start with section 5, which talks about kind of where we're at now and what we're looking to do moving forward. At the end, more than absolutely happy to take questions on obviously the previous parts of the paper, but I just thought it'd be more valuable to do that. So obviously areas that we're focusing on now as an organisation, certainly what we've seen over the last few weeks is our crewing model now has kind of reverted back to where we were before the COVID pandemic. So we've turned our roaming appliances back on now, and we're crewing those with whole-time firefighters, and we've moved back to our crews of 5 across the service as well. A piece of work that we are looking at now is that we're starting to do some modelling, looking at potential impacts of COVID moving forward. What we do understand, and we've seen it in other fire and rescue services across the country, is should COVID come into your organisation, it can have quite a dramatic impact as far as the amount of people who could be impacted by it. You know, we've got fantastic PPE in place for our staff and COVID secure measures. But the fact of the matter is the risk is always going to be there, and there is a chance that it could come into the organisation. So what we're starting to do now is look at a variety of models which will allow us to continue to deliver the service to the public should we have an outbreak, a serious outbreak in the service. Because with track and trace, it can impact a lot of people very, very quickly, as you know, we're seeing in schools and other organisations across the country. So it's a really important piece of work that we're looking at doing now. As the chair's already mentioned, you know, we've had our COVID inspection, which is now finished, and we await the outcome of that via a letter. What I will do is just provide you a very brief update in the areas that obviously were looked at. We don't know what the outcome is yet, and the chief has had some kind of informal feedback, but until they've assessed every fire and rescue service, we won't receive this in writing until December. So the areas they've looked at within Cambridgeshire are our kind of preparation and planning for the COVID pandemic. And they were looking there at a lot of our plans, our pandemic flu plans, our COVID secure strategies, and it was kind of all positive in what they found. They looked at how we maintained or have maintained our statutory duties across the COVID pandemic. So, you know, our response to incidents, and also those other areas that are a requirement within legislation, i.e. our prevention and protection activities. So how we've maintained those through COVID, and also our requirement to collaborate with other services. And as you'll be seeing in the paper, we did a lot of work with the ambulance through COVID, and some of our staff were seconded across. And we're continuing to look at opportunities moving forward as well. Health and safety of our staff and wellbeing has been really important for us all through COVID. And I think from the inspectorate, there was a real acknowledgement that this was a clear priority for us as an organisation all through the pandemic. And I'm sure that will come out in the letter. Again, how we worked with others. So this was with our local resilience forum partners, the ambulance service, and the community hub that was set up within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And they were looking at how we supported those different organisations through COVID, and very much a positive experience for us. And we were able to give support when required. And then the kind of final couple of areas were the use of the resources. So obviously we were given a grant by the government. And again, there was an acknowledgement that we've been using that for COVID reasons, if you like. And also that we'd, where possible, try to make some savings. So we had utilised the fuel savings initiative that BP brought in for emergency services, which offered free fuel in the height of the pandemic, and we were able to utilise that. So it did provide us with some savings as well. And the final area was the kind of ways of working. So what are we doing as an organisation to learn from COVID and adopt new ways of working, which will improve the organisation? And kind of hopefully you'll see from the paper that we've taken that part quite seriously, and we've got a lot of plans in place and a lot of learning from COVID that we're now going to take forward and hopefully implement across the service. A lot of our other areas in certainly fire protection and fire prevention that require more that face-to-face intervention obviously was challenging during COVID. We did deal with the most serious cases, but what we are doing now is starting to, if you like, go back out into our communities, with our operational crews and start to do that engagement work again with our vulnerable communities and start to pick up some of the inspection work as far as fire safety goes with our operational crews. Like I said, this was ongoing during the pandemic and we were responding to consultations and issues, but we want to widen that now. And then the final area is obviously training. Internal training wasn't too much of an issue during COVID. We put a lot of safe systems of work in. Our biggest problem was we rely on a lot of external venues for training. Lee Valley in Hertfordshire for our in-water training. We've got a really good collaboration with Northamptonshire for our fire behaviour training. But unfortunately, they shut all their sites down during COVID. They have now reopened and we're now actually starting back training in those venues. And we'll continue to do that moving forward. And then obviously the last section is this continuous monitoring of the economic impact of COVID. We have had the grant of around 750,000. We haven't used it all yet, but what we will be looking at now is any wider impact economically from COVID. And I guess the final part around recovery is you'll see by the paper there's a lot of new ideas and a lot of new ways of working that we're going to explore and hope to take forward. What we have learned though is, the virtual world for us has been great and has enabled us to connect throughout the whole of COVID. But there is a real acknowledgement within the organisation now that actually face-to-face contact and those connections within the organisation are just as important. So we're now starting to work through ways in which we can bring those back more regularly. And the real only way we can do that is start to make all of our premises COVID secure. So hopefully you'll know, our headquarters is now open and has a robust COVID secure strategy underpinning it. And we're now starting to work around all of our stations, which will give staff the ability, should they choose to start to go work back on our stations. And I think the important thing there is, we're still in this position where the government are advising for all staff to work from home. But I think there's a real acknowledgement from certainly the senior officers in our service that we need to give individuals within our service the ability to come in and connect with people again. And we'll make it as safe as possible to allow them to do that. And then just in summary, really important for us is this moving feast of COVID and how we stay on top of it as an organisation. What I will say now is we do have access to a lot of data and the chief officers sit as part of the strategic coordinating group. So we're now able to get real-time intelligence on outbreaks within our county, which enables us to react internally. And it allows us to operate a very much localised model where actually, we don't need to apply the same constraints across the whole county. We can tighten things up in one area should there be an outbreak, but in other areas we may not need to do that. So I think, it's around understanding the impact of COVID, but also understanding that we as a service need to have some flexibility to allow us to continue to offer the service to the public. I don't think there's anything more outside of the paper that I'll talk about now and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris, for a very detailed and informative response on that paper. Got a few people with their hands up. We'll start with Jocelyn, followed by Linda. Jocelyn.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Chris, for the report. I do want to congratulate the Fire Authority for the care and concern that it in its implementation of practices supporting the staff during the first lockdown. Now, the concern that I do have, however, with the return to full complements on the fire trucks, as it were, you've probably got a better term for it than that, but is it possible, if there are 5 on each vehicle, for social distancing requirements to be complied with? Because you see, we still are in COVID-19, aren't we? And there is, I believe, a huge risk that we can go into another lockdown. And are we putting our fire workers in difficulty in terms of being 5 to a vehicle without social distancing? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it's a question that's come up a lot over the last couple of months, and I think the answer to your question is for us, it's always been a way of how we balance risk. Obviously, we will react to what is happening locally. Putting 5 people on a fire engine, absolutely, you cannot maintain social distancing. But what we can do for those individuals is offer them the best opportunity as far as PPE goes. So all of our firefighters now will wear face coverings in our appliances and drive with the windows down. But I think the big issue with us is balancing the impact COVID is having locally and potential risk, and the risk of not riding 5 people on a fire engine, because obviously a lot of our safe systems of work for firefighting activities are based around having 5 people on a fire engine. I know during COVID we were able to certainly allow our individuals to ride on separate appliances, but that isn't really ideal. So I think it's something that we will continue to monitor. We feel that at the moment the risk is, I guess, not at a point where we need to make that decision again. And I think that it's at a point where actually we feel that the safe systems of work we've put in will allow staff to operate safely together. And actually there's an acknowledgement of the proximity that firefighters have on a fire engine is for a very limited space of time, the majority of time as well. So it is something that we'll continue to monitor, but unfortunately, there is no right or wrong answer with this at the moment. It is just a case of responding. I don't know whether the Chief, Chris, you want to come in with anything.
Yeah, I would if that's okay, Chair. Yeah, from my perspective, I think if you look around the country, fire services has taken different approaches to this. There are a number that never reduce the crewing on their appliances at all. When we didn't know what was happening and we weren't sure what the impact was going to be on our service, and we were planning for the potential to lose up to 30% of our staff, we did a number of things to try to protect our staff until we had better information. So one of those was to reduce the number of crews on an appliance from 5 to 4. The reason for that, it wasn't so much to protect them from the virus, because actually with 4 on an appliance, you will still be told to isolate under the track and trace mechanism, because you can't maintain the social distance that you're required. So as an emergency service, you know, we still have to provide a service. So we sort of accept that. It was the reason we went from 5 to 4 was to enable one person to be isolated from the rest of the crew, so that if we did get the 30% prediction, if it did come true, we would have people available to put back on pumps. So where we are now is that never came to fruition. We didn't get anywhere near 30%. In fact, we didn't even get to 10%. We know that the spread of the virus in Cambridgeshire has always been low. We know that it's continuing to be low in comparison to other parts of the country, albeit there is a rise across the piece. So therefore, we do feel that with the precautions we've put in place, it's a really good time for us to get ourselves back to 5, because as Chris says quite rightly, there's a balance to strike. The balance of ensuring we've got enough people attending the incident against the potential for them to catch COVID. The risk that does create, and that's something that we are looking at the moment, and it's not just riding 5, it's also some of the other things that we do as a service. For example, riding roaming pumps, allowing standbys to go to other fire stations, allowing crews to cover for each other. It all increases the risk of transmission. So, you know, what we're actually saying, and I've just produced a blog that's going out to all staff. We're going to continue what we're doing, but we've also got to put in place measures to deal with an issue if it does arise. So we've got to plan for our reasonable worst case scenario should somebody come into work and spread it inadvertently. We believe we can cope with that, and we believe that the current system will allow us to do that. However, we've got to do some work now to plan for what we would do if we find that's an unsustainable position to be in. So therefore, we're going to be working with our staff and our unions over the next few weeks and months to talk about what we will do differently. The one thing we can't do is just switch everything off and then not provide the level of service to the community. And that's sort of what we did for a small amount of time in the absence of any evidence and any information. But now we have got it, we need to get the service back online, supporting our communities as best we can, but putting in place plans to deal with it should the eventuality arise that we do start seeing more people becoming sick with COVID. I hope that sort of helps the answer a bit, Councillor.
Thank you. May I just come back very briefly? Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do understand, and I certainly understand the difficulty. The service has to be provided to the community. Just 2 quick points. In Cambridge City, there is a lot of concern because of the return of the students. Now, there are steps being taken by both universities to do what they can to ensure that that the safety and security and the good health of the students is retained, both for the sake of the students and for the sake of the community. But there are difficulties when students are living out of college and in private accommodation, because it's more difficult for the colleges to take steps there, and similarly for Anglia Ruskin, because of course all their students will be in private accommodation. But so many people come in from the villages, so it's not just a Cambridge City concern, it's a concern for the whole of the Cambridgeshire that people coming in may therefore be at a higher risk. So I do think we do need to pay attention to this higher risk factor, which does exist at the moment. And that, just a second really quick point, if I may, I would hope that if there were any member of staff who was required to be in a 5-person team, if they took an approach that it was not fair, not only on their own health, but for their family, all those people with whom they come into contact and their fellow workers, then I would hope that they wouldn't be penalised in any way for adopting that approach, because I see it's a safety and health issue, and you've explained that very well, that it's a dual health and safety issue, but it does necessarily remain a concern, I would have thought, for some of the operational staff. Thank you. And I wouldn't want them to be penalised. That's the point I would like to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Noted. It's quite difficult when you're running a discipline service to actually have people go off and form their own choices on issues like that. And as it's been explained, it's been well risk assessed. But I understand the point you're making, Councillor. Got a few people waiting. Linda, followed by Bill Hunt.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be as quick as I can. So first of all, I do want to say how pleased I am to note that even through this challenging time, there is continuing evidence of the service's commitment to supporting its staff's mental health and well-being. And I'm delighted to hear that it's thought that this will probably be recognised by the inspector. My question, please, is there was reference to the track and trace system and the numbers of personnel that this can affect. can affect. What is your experience of the timescale for accessing tests and getting results, and thus getting staff back to work as soon as possible? Thank you.
So yeah, within obviously the fire service at the moment, what we have done is built some really good links through COVID with Public Health England, and we do have a mechanism whereby we can offer obviously tests to staff and their families as well, actually, that's been used, and we've not had any issues really with the amount of time that tests have taken to come back. So we've not seen that impact that I know a lot of people have across the country. So as it stands at the moment, with the links it's not really impacting. Most tests are back within 24, 48 hours at the top. We've not had anyone really much longer than that has applied through, you know, our internal mechanisms for getting testing.
Thank you. I'm very relieved to hear that.
Bill, followed by Derek. Oh, you're muted, Bill.
Sorry about that, Chair. I agree with Chris. I think the personal interrelationship should not be underestimated. And I think we should be very careful about Zoom. I know that there's a lot of younger people who don't have the ability to have an office in their home or their flat, and they're sort of sharing a kitchen table with other youngsters, or they're flat sharing. So I think it doesn't present difficulties to people of perhaps our age, but when the youngsters, I think it can do. And I'm also very conscious that when I ring up a lot of officers, and I'm not talking about the fire authority here, I leave a message on their answer phone, and then half an hour later they phone me back, and I wonder which lawn they've been mowing while it's been going on. And I think if people are at work, they are at work, and I think if they're at home, there's a big temptation, and I'm not saying everybody does it, but there is a temptation, you know, not to put in the sort of 8 hours in a day. I think we should, I know it's a mental effect, because I've just absolutely got fed up of sitting in my office shouting at my laptop, and I thrive on human interaction, and I don't like shouting at laptops, and I think it affects me mentally. So I think we should take an example of the House of Commons, which, if you notice, the House of Commons is working in a COVID secure way, and people are turning up there, and they are speaking one-to-one, and they are interacting across the chamber. But of course, under circumstances, you are allowed to use Zoom or something similar. So I think you can pick the best, but I've just got a feeling that, you know, everybody will get so excited by Zoom that when they don't have to go, when they could go back, they'll all be doing Zoom, and then the whole idea of personal interaction, you know, won't happen. And I think it's okay to have Zoom when you know the people. I mean, for example, the chairman knows who I am, and he knows the sort of character that I am. But if they were all new people, you wouldn't get to know people, and you wouldn't get to know when they were telling you porkies or whether they're telling you the truth. And I think we should get back to personal contact as soon as is reasonable. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll encapsulate that with a general reply at the end. Derek, followed by Mike Shillings.
Thank you, Chairman. I was amazed at what Bill was saying. As somebody who worked from home for about 5 or 6 years, no, I never ever did work 8 hours a day. It was more like the 8, 9 or 10. So there. But my questions really are twofold. One is the economic recovery costs. I see we've spent about 2/3 of it. In the unlikely event that the money isn't all spent, do we have to return it? And the second question is, I'm surprised it hasn't come up, is because of COVID, etc., there's not going to be the usual bonfire night gatherings with many, many people. So it's going to be backyard fireworks like it was sort of 20, 30 years ago. And I wonder what we as a fire authority are helping people come to terms with that. Thank you, Chair.
If you wish to give a reply now, Chris, because we've got 2 more people waiting to ask questions, so it might get a bit convoluted. Do you wish to respond?
I certainly reply to the firework question, and then maybe Matthew can jump in and talk about the money, because he knows a lot more about it than I do. So certainly in relation to fireworks, yeah, absolutely, it's going to feel very different this year. Ironically, firework night for us is normally quite quiet, and that's across the whole of the UK. It's normally the lead up to firework night where you see more incidents, when children tend to go out and buy fireworks and set fires and that. Actually, firework night is normally generally quite controlled. There's an absolute acknowledgement that most people will be having it at home this year. That's why we'll continue, and we've got plans in place to put proactive messaging out, and we'll continue to put all the safety messages out we would any other year. So yes, an absolute acknowledgement it'll be very different, but we think we've got some good ideas and some good messaging that we'll be putting out over the next week or so.
Okay.
Matthew.
Yeah, carry on, Matthew.
If I could come in there, in terms of the grant, I'm under no doubt that we will spend it all, Councillor Giles. There is still a constant spend going on a month by month basis. So by the time we get to the end of the year, I have no doubt. I mean, the issue for me will be that we'll probably spend more than actually the grant we have received in the end, particularly as we continue to support the purchase of PPE and such like. So I'm pretty convinced that all that money will be gone.
I'm sure it will be. Mike, followed by Sebastian.
Thank you, Chairman. First question is back to my millions. How many cases have we had of people who've been either sick or else had to shelter because of contact with someone who was sick? Secondly, will the reduction from 5 to 4 on essential manning make life after COVID any easier in the remote fire stations? Thank you.
So in relation to COVID cases within Cambridgeshire, we've been quite lucky. I can certainly get the exact figures to you, but they're figures. We did have an outbreak, as you'll be aware, at March Fire Station, and we've had the odd cases across the spate of COVID, but nothing significant to cause us certainly issues within the service. But we do have those numbers. I haven't got them on me now, so we can certainly make them available to members. And
that would be very good. Thank you.
And could you repeat your second question?
We've got a reduction in the number of people who have to man engines, appliances, and that is presumably COVID based. Will that have any lasting impact, particularly in stations where we have numbers difficulties in getting the requisite crews?
Well, as far as operational crews being off with COVID, we've not really seen that. Clearly, within rural stations, availability of fire engines continues to be an issue. During the pandemic, what we did actually see is the reverse. Because a lot of individuals are on call staff or furloughed, we saw an increase in availability, which was obviously something that we didn't anticipate, but it was great. We had in excess of 20 fire engines available every day. Clearly, as people have started to go back to work, we've seen a reduction in that availability, but that availability isn't caused by COVID at present, and obviously there is a potential it could be. It is mainly by people going back to their day jobs.
Right. I think I was asking a slightly different question, which is whether or not the reduction of essential manning from 5 to 4 will have a lasting effect post-COVID.
Chris, can I come in? Would that be okay?
Yeah, please.
Yes. I think it's an interesting question, Councillor, because post-COVID, and in fact now we're aiming to go back to 5. So I think the impact, the concern I have is the longer that we ride at 4, the more it would be apparent to the casual observer that we don't need 5 to ride our fire appliances.
Yes.
So my concern in the longer term, the pressure could be on the service to reduce from 5 to 4. Now, that would be a concern for me, because in a very rural county where attendance times can be extended, and as we know that the on-call service, we do on occasions struggle, particularly during the day, having 4 people turning up to an incident is not as good as having 5. You know, and I think for our safe, we have safe systems of work that are predicated around 4, but ideally you have 5 on an appliance. So, you know, I think it's really important that we do try to maintain 5 as much as we can, and we need to be guided by the science. So if we find in our service that we are starting to have incidents and it's increasing rapidly, then we need to do something different to what we're doing now. The gut reaction, and this is something that we had a long discussion about yesterday at a senior team meeting, is, well, if the current shift system isn't conducive for us riding 5, because that's what we're able to do, then we probably need to look at changing the shift system so that we don't mix staff enough, so that we can maintain the 5 on those pumps. Now, I really wouldn't want to go there unless I had to do that, and unless it was in the interests of the community, because we had to sustain a position of 4. So what I'm really hoping we can do, and this is where it's really important we work with our staff, is that everybody look at themselves in their private lives in the time that they're not at work, which is most of the time. When they come to work, we have good, robust measures in place so that our staff are as protected as they can be. And then we keep an eye on the rate of increase in the virus, not just in our service, but also in our surrounding area. And we use all those factors to balance whether we do need potentially to shift away from the system. But ideally we don't, because we don't want to put our staff through that pain unnecessarily.
Thanks for that. Yeah, must give a bit more meat to the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, excellent report, and an indication of the sterling work, as usual, done by not only the senior team, but throughout the whole organisation. I would like to see in next iterations, of which I assume there will be some for our next meetings in the future, just a reference to the fact that obviously we are not an island, and there are communities around us which have different infection rates and speeds than our own. So just to give you a small example, Gamlingay Fire Station is very close to the border with Potton. Potton's had 8 cases of coronavirus in the last week, which is quite a lot for a community that size. And of course, being so close, the likelihood is that a call coming in to Gamlingay may well be for over the border. Once they get there, of course, if it's a big event, then there will be there'll be tenders coming in from perhaps 3, 4, 5, or 6 other locations. And I think there needs to be a recognition that people working together, in a situation like that, that the risk has been assessed and it has been addressed and acknowledged. The second thing I want to say is, whilst I'm always entertained by Councillor Hunt's views on the modern world, it does appear to be a world that he's becoming increasingly out of touch with. I must disassociate myself with the comments that he has made in relation to officers, either of the fire service or of any other local government organisation at the moment. I think it is extremely unlikely that the reason they are not responding immediately to him is that they are out mowing the lawn. I think they probably have much more important things to be doing than responding to Councillor Hunt by dropping everything immediately. And I think that we need to just recognise that officers of all public authorities are having a pretty difficult time at the minute, and a little flexibility from members would go a very long way. Lastly, I must reject any comparison with any authority with the House of Commons. Just at the moment, it is a cesspit, and I frankly don't think any of us want to be associated with what's going on there.
Right, thank you for that. That was a good point about over the border working. So I don't know, Chris, if you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, I can respond to that, and it's something that we're very much aware of, and yeah, absolutely, we can sort of add an update into the paper. I think this really came to life for us at the start of the pandemic, and I'll take you back to the Corcus Crisp factory fire. That was the first incident we'd really ever had where we had a number of services from different counties attending a large incident within Cambridgeshire. And it wasn't actually just the other fire and rescue services, it was the other agencies, i.e. the ambulance and the police. So out the back of that incident, we did a lot of work with regional partners, certainly with regional fire and rescue services, to make them aware of what our procedures were and what our requirements were for individuals working at incidents within Cambridgeshire. Because certainly at that stage, their personal protective equipment requirements weren't quite as high as ours. So out the back of the debrief of that, there was an absolute acknowledgement that needs to be done, and that was done. So actually, we do have a good relationship now with regional partners and a good understanding of the PPE requirements when they're working within our county.
Thank you for that answer, Chris. Councillor Hunt, I can see you wish to speak. What I don't want is
it'll be very quick.
Spats between members. If you want to have a spat, you go outside and do it.
It's not a spat. It's a clarification. I was really trying to be a little bit light-hearted, and I've never had anything other than excellence from the fire authority, and I was just trying to put a little bit of jocularity into the conversation, and it was meant to be light-hearted, and I'm sorry if Councillor Kins has taken it quite so seriously, and if he has, then I apologise.
Chair, could I just make one comment? Would that be okay?
Yeah, okay. Well, don't get in between those two, please.
Oh no, certainly not. Certainly not. I just wanted to make a comment, and it relates to the COVID. I think that the HMI are going to be very positive about our service and the fact that we've managed to keep on top of our day job, if you like, as well as looking after our staff throughout this period. I think there is a point. It's a really important point in here. I think keeping our staff safe is right. They are all working really hard, yes, but human contact and Councillor Hunt did raise that. Human contact is really important. And that's a reason why we as a senior team have been out. I mean, I've been to every single whole time, every day cruise station, apart from Wisbech, and I've done 6 or 7, maybe even 8 or 9 on-call stations within the last 3 or 4 weeks. That human contact is the thing that we're missing. So we've gone from one extreme where we're all in the office all the time to another extreme where we're not in the office. And I think there's a balance to strike. And I think that's something that we're working towards as a service, to maintain the safety of our staff, utilise new technology because it's really good and enables us to communicate in very effective ways, but also work out how we get that human contact back and get the team working back together, because we've got lots of teams working in isolation, but the whole team isn't coming together as much as it could. And we're trying to work through what that looks like and how we can support people in a safe way coming back together, because that's what makes this a great fire and rescue service, and that's why we're really keen to push it ahead. Hopefully I haven't offended anyone in saying any of that.
No, we're quite used to this. Thank you for those additional comments, because the debate has been excellent on COVID, and I'm sure members have learned a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously, we'll be talking about it again in the future. But I, for one, am really happy and content in the way that this authority is managing the COVID situation, and fingers crossed about the inspection result. We have no more waiting, so I'm going to move on. We've been asked to note that report. Thank you very much to 2 Chris's. The report is duly noted, and no doubt we'll come back to it sometime in the future. If we can now go on to item 7, Equality and Inclusion Compliance Report. Quite a lengthy report, as you can see, pages 35 to 42. Can I ask John Anderson to introduce this report, which starts at page 35? John, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Can I ask that members either approve the contents of the report or provide me with any comments or requested changes they would like to see in the report prior to us going to publication? So, as you said, Chairman, it's a very long report with a lot of detailing, which was kindly been brought together for us by Jackie Gavin, our Equality and Inclusion Advisor. I'll just go through the main highlights of the report and then I'll be happy to take any questions or comments at the end. I'm pleased to say, in terms of the gender pay gap, that has closed, and this year it stands at 14.9%. This is the closest it's ever been since we started reporting on this measure, and it's in part due to a number of issues. A series of honorariums are being paid to female staff, including 4 more female drivers as they're becoming more qualified. We've had 3 female firefighters returning from maternity leave and therefore picking up CPD payments that they were not getting before. We've also been, I'm pleased to say, have several promotions of female staff. And also the general uptake of female staff staying in the service longer has improved. In terms of our diversity of recruitment, it's quite a mixed picture. The number of Black and ethnic minority applicants fell from 48 to 43 on the previous year's numbers, and that's resulted in the fall from 5 to 1 on the number of successful applicants. The number of female applicants has also fallen from 194 to 182, and the number of successful applicants has also fallen from 23 to 20. The number of applicants declaring disability has fallen from 19 to 18, but thankfully the number of those being successful in gaining employment has risen from 2 to 5. The number of applicants declaring a faith or belief other than Christian has increased from 25 to 28, and the number gaining employment has increased from 0 to 2. The number of applicants identifying as LGBT fell from 36 to 23, but the number gaining successful employment has increased from 3 to 5. We've continued to deliver our positive action initiatives and activities across the county, even during lockdown, and found new and innovative ways of delivering those. And we are trying to make sure that people see CFRS as a career of choice, no matter where they come from. This included arranging for a number of specific events aimed at attracting recruits from female and BAME applicant areas. We're also having a number of have a go days for some of them aimed specifically at people from underrepresented groups. These have been taking place recently and including this week, and we've managed to deliver them in a COVID secure way. In terms of our business fire safety seminars, there obviously was a pause in these during the COVID crisis, as it would not be appropriate to bring people together for those sort of seminars. But outside of that time, the number of people attending from BAME communities stands at about 7% of those attending, which is slightly below the demographics of the county. That's a brief overview of the report. I'm happy to take any comments or questions members may have.
Well, thank you for that, John. This is a very detailed report and it's a really good read. 2 people at the moment. We'll start off with Mike Shellings, please. You're muted, Mike. No, you're still muted.
Got it.
That's it.
I do apologise for that. Right. First of all, to say that the scope of the report and the wide range of points picked up suggests to me or confirms to me that the service has an extremely wide range of concerns about the staff that it employs. And I think this exemplifies why I think the service is such a high quality, and I commend the report. On a slightly more picky point, Section 1, we want to assess whether different ethnic communities have the same knowledge, etc., as in the past limited English language has proved to be a barrier. We therefore monitor the ethnicity and preferred language of attendees. What I think we should be doing is monitoring the ethnicity and preferred language of the non-attendees.
Okay.
End of point, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. John, do you wish to respond to any of the comments made on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're working on in terms of trying to increase the attendance of people from a wide range of different communities to our events. But I think it's quite hard to actually understand who isn't attending. But we're obviously doing a lot of work with different community groups to try and encourage attendance.
Okay, Jocelyn, followed by Linda.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for a most comprehensive report, as Councillor Shellham's acknowledged. I just had a couple of points, and that is that I wonder if the Fire Authority consults with or exchanges information, I don't mean personal information, but I mean numbers and so forth, and recruiting practices with other fire authorities, but also with authorities of a similar type within Cambridgeshire. For example, the numbers going down is really of considerable concern, isn't it? I mean, you've said that also numbers have gone up in other regards, but would the same thing be happening with the police? Are they endeavouring to do what the Fire Authority is doing? And have they found that over this same period numbers have gone down, for example? Because that would be interesting, because it would indicate that there's something going on in the community in Cambridgeshire rather than it's something that the authority is doing or not doing. And the second point I'd like to make is that although there are limitations with Zoom, it still is possible to actually have really quite good discussions and group events on Zoom. Of course, it counts on people having access to Zoom, and many people don't, and we have to be aware of that. But it is possible to do training sessions and to do encouragement sessions, to inclusion sessions, and so on. I mean, I've done this and run a global session where we get people from Australia, the US, Canada, Italy, and so on online, and it actually makes it really more interesting in some ways, so that if it were possible, for example, to have some sort of an international event where you did talk and have presentations from people from other countries, that might attract an audience, and it could raise some interesting issues about what's going on elsewhere. That's just a suggestion, but I do commend the authority for the work it's doing. And I really must raise with Deb and also with Councillor Kindersley, we really have to get back to work, because we were working very hard on a report on this, and we need to get back so that we can finalise our report. Thanks.
Is there any points you wish to respond on, John, before I go on to Councillor Hart?
Just a couple of points. We do work quite closely with certainly with our regional neighbours, and I know Jackie is involved in a lot of different groups and is obviously very well respected within the community, has lots of contacts. So she has brought a lot of knowledge of other sectors to help us with what we're doing. I think in terms of the police, they've always had a lot more success than us in terms of recruitment from a diverse pool of people, and we have engagement and talked to them to see what we could learn as well.
Thank you. Linda, followed by Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chairman, and I apologise if this is a bit of a picky question, but one of the figures that jumped out at me was under the Safe and Well visits, 3% BAME community receiving visits, 97% white. And I noticed that you very neatly told us that doesn't correlate to the local population mix. My question is, do we have any indication of how that relates to incidents that affect, where there is maybe a fire or some incident that occurs to the BAME community, because it would be interesting to know just how much we really need to make a priority of trying to increase that number. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I haven't got those statistics to the fire to hand, but I know that certainly some of the people within the BAME community would fall into the area that we're targeting for fire safety interventions due to the fact that it tends to attract people in certain demographics, to affect people in certain demographics more than others. So they are an area that we are targeting because of that. However, it is always it's always quite difficult sometimes to get the data to engage. And one of the problems we find in terms of our safe and well visit, some of the people from the BAME community are not registered with GPs and are not in the system in the same way as people from other communities are. So it's harder to actually get the data to make contact with them and provide services to them.
I appreciate you making efforts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to commend the report. I think it's very detailed. It's good. We raised the question of why are we almost like behind the police, and that's probably because they started 10 years before us. So therefore, they're a lot further up, and it's a lot more, in people's minds wanting, do I want to be a policeman? Because fire officer, we really didn't start looking until the last 4 or 5 years. And I think give it another 4 or 5 years, we will probably be having a different type of conversation, I'm hoping. The good thing is when you speak to people, because of the work that's being done at ground level, whether they're turning up to festivals, mosques, wherever, there is more of a profile for the fire service now than probably there has ever been. I can certainly speak for Peterborough. I don't know what it's like in Cambridge, but I think it's a slow start, but we are going in the right direction.
Thank you for those positive comments. John, is there anything you wish to come back on?
No, I just to agree with what Councillor Jamil has just said. I think we did have a long period of time where we weren't recruiting, and I think that's also had an impact. And with anything like this, it's something you have to put a lot of effort into over a long period of time to actually reap the benefits of. And so I think we are heading in the right direction, but it will take time for all the work we're doing now to work its way through in terms of results.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on. Well, we're being asked to agree the content of the report in Appendix A, which we've just been through. Nobody's suggested any.
I'll just come down and go out again.
Nobody's suggested any changes. Once the content is approved, the final design work and incorporation of appropriate images will be undertaken before the report goes on wider publication. I cannot see any objections, so that being the case, we'll agree to it and then move on. Right, we'll go on to number 9. No doubt Councillor Shellings is looking forward to this one. Audit completion report on page 79. And I'd like to ask Matthew Weller of BDO to take us through this report, which starts at page 79 of the agenda pack. Matthew, over to you.
Okay, hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so background to this report is that we initially provided our audit plan, which was emailed around to the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee back in May. Then we provided an audit progress report in July to the Policy and Resources Committee, at which point we were sort of a significant way through the audit. At this moment in time, the large majority of our audit is now done. The key thing which remains outstanding is our pension fund testing, which is audited by a different audit body at Cambridgeshire County Council, and we're still awaiting the results of their audit to incorporate into our work. So this audit completion report outlines the results of our audit to date, but we need to acknowledge there are still a few areas outstanding at this moment in time. So I'm going to go through and just pull out the key points from this. So first of all, on page 85 of the pack, we've outlined our materiality threshold for the audit. So this has been assessed on the same basis as our audit plan, which was issued in May, but we have revised the numbers to reflect the values included within the draft accounts. From there, I'm going to jump straight to page 92. So we've set out each of our audit risks one by one. So the first risk was management override of controls. We found no evidence of management override, although it was noted a control deficiency in respect that there was some journals posted by generic user ID. I believe this point was discussed at the Policy and Resources meeting back in July. On expenditure cutoff on page 93, we have not identified any issues in respect of this area, but we've only done our testing up till May, and we will need to extend it up to the point of sign off, which we expect to be before the end of November. On page 94, valuation of non-current assets, we found a few minor misstatements in the values that went through the accounts. These are all expected to be adjusted for and are subsequently outlined further down the report. The one thing to draw to your attention in this particular area is that within the valuation report, the valuer has raised a material uncertainty statement, which basically says that the valuers are their best the valuations are their best estimate at a moment in time, but we can't place as much reliance on them as we would in a normal year, which is entirely driven by the impact of coronavirus and the impact that might have on the valuations applied to the assets. Our next risk is valuation of the pension liability on page 96. As previously mentioned, the majority of our testing in this work is still outstanding because the work is undertaken by the pension fund auditor at Cambridgeshire County Council. We have reviewed the numbers within the accounts and we've got a few adjustments which have been raised as a result of that, but we can't really conclude on that at this stage until we've heard back from the pension fund auditor. The other key thing to raise in respect to the pension fund is that quite a large value adjustment is required for the McLeod judgment. So this is something which came up last year, but basically the actuary Hymans Robertson were slightly over prudent in their assumptions for this. So they factored in that it included all staff and put an extra liability into the pension fund that all staff would be affected by the McLeod judgment. It's now been determined that it's only staff as at 2012 that would be affected. And as a result, we've had to massively decrease the liability. So there's quite a large adjustment going through the accounts in respect of that. Our next risk is then on page 101. So this is the use of the big red button software tool, which is used to produce the accounts. The authorities had a number of issues with this in previous years, and this has led to a high level of adjustments to the accounts. We can report that there has been significant improvement in this area this year. We still found sort of a few narrative issues which need to be amended, but it's nothing like on the scale we've experienced in previous years. On page 102, we then set out our going concern assessment for the authority. So since the issuance of this report, we have now received a going concern assessment from management, and we can confirm that we agree with management's view that the authority is a going concern. I'm then going to go to page 105, which sets out first our unadjusted misstatements, then our adjusted misstatements subsequent to that. So our unadjusted misstatements are relatively low value in nature. So there's 3 raised in total. The first one relates to issues with the figures put through in respect to the property valuations from the prior year, which wasn't adjusted last year, which then has a knock-on impact into this year's accounts, and therefore we have to re-report the impact of it this year. The second one is also from last year. So this relates to the fact that your pension fund is valued as at the 31st of December and not year end the 31st of March. So last year we said there was a movement of 724k between the 31st of December and year end, which obviously would also have an impact this year because that movement's been recognised this year rather than last year. We do expect a similar kind of adjustment this year, but until we've got the results of the pension fund auditor audit, we're not able to report on what the value of that adjustment may be. And then we've also raised an unadjusted. So in terms of the McLeod, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, this affects both the local government pension scheme and the firefighters pension scheme. The impact on the local government pension scheme is quite low at 160,000. So we're not expecting that to be adjusted, but we are expecting the impact on the firefighters pension scheme to be adjusted. which, as set out on page 108, is 1.3 million. We have a few other adjustments listed out on page 107 to 108, which we are expecting to be made. These are relatively low value, and then on the whole not stuff that the fire authority needed to make, but they've chosen to put them through anyway in order to improve the quality of their accounts. And otherwise, I'm then going to go to page 113, where we set out our recommendations. So we've raised 3 recommendations in total, 2 of which, the one on the generic user IDs and the related party declaration forms, were reported to the Policy and Resources Committee in July. So I'm not going to mention them again. The one new one we've added since then is management review of the valuation of the net pension liability. So this one relates to the fact that the pension liability forms, or the pension liability numbers, come from the actuary and were given to the authority. Now, the authority did review these before they went into the accounts, but they didn't document anything to evidence the review. So we can't therefore confirm that that review has taken place, and therefore that requires us to raise a recommendation that that review is documented in future years so that we can evidence it has actually taken place. The rest of this report, I'm going to say, is for information only, and there's nothing else I particularly wanted to cover, so happy to go to questions at this point.
Thank you for that, Matthew. I'm now looking at Councillor Shallings, our audit guru, if he wishes to make any observations.
First of all, I need to check if I'm audible. Yeah, oh yeah, I am, yes.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
Right. What I would say is this: I've got a couple of detailed questions, but in general, the audit of the county council's financial arrangements is a nightmare. Compared with that, the pension fund accounts, which also come through to us, are sweetness and light and simple to understand. And I find these authority accounts simpler and easier to absorb again. So I just thank the people who've done the report for making something that even I can understand. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, those comments are appreciated. Bill, followed by Simon. Bill?
Thank you, Chair. On page 141, you're saying that there is a 3.184 million in general reserves, and that's sort of 10%. Now, I don't know if you've explained that somewhere else in your report, but that just seems to be rather a high percentage to have in reserve, or is there some sort of special things that apply to fire authorities where they need to carry a higher reserve?
I can come in there if you want, Chairman.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, Councillor Hunt, I mean, yeah, you're right, absolutely. 10% is a little on the high side. It's more than prudent, should we say. It's unfair to ask probably Matthew to make a judgment on that. But where we're at, we have plans to actually run down that reserve to a reasonable level, and that's set out within last year's medium-term financial strategy and will be offset this year. So we have plans to use it, so it will be brought down to a more reasonable and prudent level.
Thank you. What would you say a prudent level would be, roughly?
This is the $1 million question. I would suggest that anything between sort of 5 to 7% for an emergency service, because we only need 1 or 2 things to hit us, Councillor Hunt, particularly in terms of things like if we had a prolonged summer where it was, for whatever reason, operationally we were busier than we'd ever expected to be. And actually, let's be clear, the pandemic could cause us to draw down on some of that reserve as well. So I think between 5 and 7% is a prudent number.
Yeah, I can understand that you've got sort of almost special circumstances more than the normal business. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had the privilege of obviously being able to see this when it came through Policy and Resources, so it's good to see the progress that's been made. I guess it's a thank you to Matthew and his team, and also the auditors, really. It has been a really challenging time. But this may not go down well with what I'm going to say now. But one of the things I raised at policy and resources when it came here was about the related declaration forms. Members, we need to lead by example. And I think that we all need to make sure that we get our forms in as requested so that we can lead by example. So that's a point I want to make, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Well made. As some of our democratic service members will say, trying to get members to do even the most simplest task is like herding cats, and I tend to agree with them at times.
Can I come back in on that one, please?
Yes, by all means.
So I can just confirm on the related party declarations, we now only have one outstanding, and the one that was outstanding was for a member that left the authority during the year and is no longer in post. Everyone in post has now returned to their declarations, but because there's one that is outstanding, even though that person's no longer here, we're still required to raise the recommendation.
Well, can I give a clap and thank you to all the members then? So thank you.
May I say, Chairman, that Finance despaired about getting all these forms in as regards the main accounts, and it took me 8 phone calls to make one of the members produce their form. And I actually have better things to do.
I totally understand. It's a problem every year. On a very rare occasion, I've been part of the problem, but I've learnt the error of my ways, and I try to do it in a timely manner now.
Well, we know where you live, Chairman. That's the point. May I make another couple of quick points, Chairman?
Yes,
First of all, under land material valuation uncertainty, there was a reference to regular review. Have they taken place? Are they taking place? Will they take place? What's the programme? And secondly, there was an assurance on page 96, assurances from the pension fund auditors had not been received at the time of writing the report. Have they now been received? Because I've seen the pension fund report. It's all there.
Okay, let's carry on, Matthew.
Yeah, so on the first point regarding the property valuations, we can confirm that all properties were revalued as at the 31st of March 2020 and we have done the appropriate audit procedures in respect to those properties. In respect to the pension fund, we still haven't received the assurance from the pension fund auditor. So I think the Cambridgeshire County Council have prepared the pension fund accounts, but I don't think the audit of that has been concluded yet, is what we're outstanding, and we need a letter of assurance from the auditor.
Do you want me to shout at them?
Right.
Yeah, yes or no?
So I am in contact with the engagement lead on the Pension Fund Authority. We have been discussing it. I believe it is very well progressed. I think they're just waiting for 1 or 2 queries to be responded to from the actuary on the triennial data question to come back. So I think we are nearly there. And so no shouting required just yet.
Oh, you've ruined my afternoon.
If we haven't had it within the next sort of week or so, I will be escalating it.
Good.
Because we need some time to complete our procedures.
You do, yes.
Matthew Warren, do you wish to say something, or have you?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Kevin.
On,
just to say thank you to BDO through this process, because actually Matthew and the team, and we have got a very small team in fire that are preparing these accounts, but actually the common sense approach and practical approach that's been taken by BDO has really helped them as well. So I think it's been a smooth process this year, notwithstanding Big Red Button has been easier for us, but actually it's been a much smoother process, and I think everybody's worked really well under the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So, there's a thanks from me there, because it's been as positive of an experience as you could possibly have when going through an audit.
Well, thank you for those comments. Very positive at this stage. I cannot see anybody else wishing to make a comment. So what we're going to do now There seems to be a general consensus in support of the recommendations, which is to note the audit completion report for 2019-2020, which is attached in Appendix 1. So I propose to take the vote now. If anyone disagrees in accepting it, please use the raised hand function now. No, we're all in agreement, which is excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to number 9, which is the meetings card. And it is my intention to withdraw this item. And members, the reason I'm going to withdraw this item is just come to light. May and June next year is when there is a large new cohort of county council members at Shire Hall. And that involves a lot of additional meetings and inductions. And what I didn't want to do is have people put all these dates in their diaries and then find once the county council diary has been reassessed that they've all got to be crossed out. So I'm going to withdraw this item, ask for a new meetings card to be drawn up, taking into account this congestion in May and June, and then it will be circulated to all members. Has anybody got any problems with that approach? No.
Chairman, if I could ask perhaps that when the composite meeting card is put together, that it includes not only the fire authority meetings, but also the 2 main subcommittees, because there tends to be clashes with, for example, planning committee at the county council. We could do without the party political congresses. I can't even remember what they're called now.
Conferences.
And it would be also helpful as a non-parent to have half terms and added as well, because they are not popular with people organising meetings. Just a thought.
That's a very good thought. And I know as a matter of course, members' services do look at all the meeting cards from the principal authorities, Peterborough City Council, Cambridgeshire County Council, and they try to avoid dates wherever possible. But it seems that Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays are heavily booked before we even start. But yes, your comments have been noted and they'll be taken into account. Ian, you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's just with regard to February of next year, which is technically before everything else. On that particular date, there is an Environment and Sustainability Committee meeting. So all those that are members of that would not be able to attend the seminar in the morning, which is at least 3 of us.
Right.
Chairman.
I think that's a perfectly valid comment, and Dawn's heard what you said, and if we're going to have a seminar, we'll try and have a separate date for that.
Thank you.
David.
Just to add that Peterborough City Council have councillors up for election next May, and off the top of my head, I think it's about 2/3 will be up. Yes,
the Fire Authority is going to be a different place to be come May and June next year, and the meetings, there's no way of avoiding them, are going to be very congested, and we'll do our best to cater for everybody's needs. It's not an easy task. So you will have a new amended meeting card as soon as possible. And on that note, can I thank you all for attending? There were some quite lengthy but interesting items on the agenda. From the quality of the questions, you seem to enjoy it. So I'm going to bring the meeting to a close. I'm going to bring the meeting to a close, Bill. Right, thank you all for attending. Much appreciated. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chairman.